If you're between the ages of, say, 4 and 40, chances are you know the books of Judy Blume. Beginning in the early 1970s with works such as Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, in which an 11-year-old girl worries about puberty and religion, the Fudge series about a fourth grader and his baby brother, and books that address teen sexuality head-on, Blume has written about the real lives of young people. And young people have responded, with more than 75 million of her books sold.
I was a small, shy, anxious child with eczema, as fearful as Sheila the Great, as imaginative as Sally J. Friedman.
I was always a storyteller, although no one ever told me that I could grow up to become a writer, and certainly it never occurred to me. I never shared my stories, but they were there, inside my head, as far back as I can remember. You don't decide to write. You write because you can't help yourself, because it's there inside you and it won't leave you alone.
I love to read, and I think any child who loves to read will read anything, including the back of the cereal box, which I did every morning. But I longed to find in books children like me with thinking what I was thinking about, families like my family, which wasn't perfect. It was a loving family, but it wasn't perfect. And I knew, you know, there were secrets within families. I never read anything like that when I was growing up. We do feel that surely we're alone, we're the only ones. And for me, I kept that inside. I wasn't going to tell anybody, guess what I'm really like? Guess what I'm really thinking about? You keep that inside, you keep that very private, and you pretend to the world that you are normal. The voice in my head was the voice of a child, and the voice that came out spontaneously on paper was the voice of a child.
Why children's books? It never occurred to me to write anything else. I'd always identified with children, and I was so connected to the child I was. I remembered everything so vividly that when I sat down to write Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, which is, by the way, my third book. We'll forget the first two. Margaret spilled out spontaneously. And yes, for those of you who are wondering, I really did do those exercises. And no, they don't work. At least not for me. I had no agenda. I wanted only to write the best, the most honest books that I could. I hoped, I prayed that someday I would be published, and later that someday I might reach my audience.
Just as a parent, even though my children are grown now, is that it was such an appealing way to talk about these issues through literature, through stories, through how kids felt.
Books can be great bridges to communication. You know, when my daughter was growing up, we would sometimes read the same book. She was very shy, she was very quiet, but we could talk through characters in books. What do you think about, you know, what Karen did here? And I think a lot of parents like that. That's good, and kids like it too. But I wrote a book long ago called Then Again Maybe I Won't, about a boy's coming of age and puberty. And he read this book. He read this book, and he said to me, you know, Noni,
yes.
You don't really know anything about wet dreams.
I doubt there's a more loyal, supportive audience anywhere. And almost from the start, as many of you know, they have written to me. So I wanted to share a couple of their earliest letters, which remain my favorites. Dear Judy, how do you do these books? Do you do them with your mind, or do you use a kit? Dear Judy, please send me the facts of life in number order. Mrs. Roth had some advice for my mother. Look, Essie, she said, when they ask you how she knows all those things, you say, I don't know, but not from me.
Dear Judy, why do you use the word bitch in your book Blubber? Why do you talk about kids stripping?
I'm too young to learn about girls' underwear. My dad says, you must be a Democrat. Whatever that means. He says you're in need of a spiritual program. P.S. Are all your books perverted?
For some, Judy Blume has gone too far. Her books have faced restrictions or outright bans in some school districts after complaints from parents. The American Library Association says Blume is the second most censored author of the past 15 years.
If a child reads this, a child may ask questions about it. So if you are an adult who says, I don't want my child to know about this, so I don't want my child to read about this, I don't want my child to ever think about this, I don't want puberty to ever happen to my child. That's what it was really about. Yeah. And so, you know, don't be honest and don't prepare them and don't let them know that this is all natural and normal.
I used to get letters that said, you told my son about puberty, and I wanted to be the one to tell him. Well, his son was 12. What was he waiting for? You know, you can't wait for that moment. You have to be able to talk to them and answer their questions. Dear Judy, my mom never talks about the things young girls think most about. She doesn't know how I feel. I don't know where I stand in the world. I don't know who I am. That's why I read, to find myself. Elizabeth, age 13. And Elizabeth is the reason that I keep writing. So I think, what other word can I use? And then, I mean, this happened to me in my new book. And then I thought, this is an angry 15-year-old kid. This is the word that this 15-year-old kid is going to say. And if I don't write it, then every kid who reads that book says, what is this?
She's not authentic.
What is this?
They'll say she's not authentic, she doesn't know, and
she's
pulling her punches.
You know, the urge to ban is contagious. It spreads like wildfire from community to community. If it happens at your school, your library, your theaters or museums, please speak out. I never dreamed my books would become a target of the censors. I mean, this is America, right? Aren't we supposed to celebrate our intellectual freedom? I never planned to become an activist, but things happen. You either take action or you don't. Standing up and speaking out for what you believe in, well, it feels a lot better than doing nothing.
What is wonderful about you, and I've known this for a while, is just this spirit, this sense of joy, as well as this sense of mission, as well as this sense of they're not going to stop me. I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and because I believe, and I know that I hear from 70 million readers, and they tell me, don't stop.
Judy Blume.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.